By far the largest number of buses on the road today are school buses. In the U.S., 440,000 of the 700,000 buses in operation are designed for student transportation. 23.5 million kids climb aboard every day.
How important are school buses? Well, how important is the future of our country? The future of our country depends on our education system. And our education system, as we know it today, couldn't exist without a way to transport children to and from school.
The Bluebird Body Company of Fort Valley, Georgia builds a wide variety of transit and intercity coaches. But they're best known for their school buses. Bluebird builds more than anyone, 19,000 a year. The company has been building buses for over 70 years.
The purpose of a school bus is to safely and economically transport children from their place of residence to that wonderful place we call the schoolhouse.
Unified efforts to transport students began in the late 1800s. By 1910, 60% of the states had transportation programs to bring kids to class, by whatever means available.
There were horse-drawn vehicles to begin with, and wagon pulled behind the horses. And then when trucks began to develop, they would take a 1.5-ton truck and throw a canvas over it and haul children in that. Some of the early school contracts said that a man could haul the children to school during the school year, during the summer months he could haul pigs in the trucks.
But it wasn't the fact that kids were sharing their rides with pigs that ignited an explosion in the school bus industry.
In modern days, we take consolidated schools for granted, but back in the old days, there was a one-room schoolhouse and the children could walk to school. But then in the late 20s, early 30s, schools began to consolidate, and that meant students had to go further to school, and the need for school buses was born basically in the early 30s.
In the late 1920s, being in the school bus building business looked as promising as bringing the teacher an apple on test day. Bluebird took flight in 1927. Foreseeing the trend, Albert Luce started what would become the Bluebird Bus Company and built his first bus, Bluebird No. 1.
Bluebird No. 1 was built in the Ford garage in Perry, Georgia. Dad was a Ford dealer there, and business was very slow. He had mechanics that needed work, he had tools, he had equipment, and they built this bus utilizing steel for the frame, sheet metal for the sides, canvas for the windows. It has a canvas top with wooden ribs there.
Bluebird No. 1 was simply a Model T truck with a box built on the back to hold students. There were no safety standards at the time. It wasn't until 1939 that Frank Sear, a professor at Columbia University, organized the first conference to set safety standards for school buses. From aisle width to ceiling height to body length. Sear believed grain trucks should be used to haul grain, but school bus cargo should be handled with a little more caution. School administrators and bus builders hashed out 44 standards to make bus building more universal and student transportation safer. Frank Sear's most obvious contribution was the color yellow, school bus yellow. Conference attendees voted to paint all buses a distinct shade of yellow, increasing their visibility in the early morning hours. Bluebird attended that groundbreaking conference. Albert Luce, with his 3 sons, worked to meet the changing needs of the country, and Bluebird's production soared. Over the next 60 years, school bus construction changed dramatically. School buses are designed and constructed differently than city or intercity buses. They're designed to make both constant stops and long trips. There are also extremely strict guidelines concerning the way buses are built. Safety is concern number 1. In fact, they're the safest form of ground transportation, bar none. Bluebird operates colossal factories. Every day, giant rolls of steel go in the front door, and every 20 minutes, a completed bus drives out the back door.
We have a large variety of different kind of fab equipment. We have lasers, we have turret punch presses, have right angle shears, of course press brakes, welders, spot welders. We have 3 1,000-ton presses that make anywhere from our bumpers to our side metal.
Once the individual components are fabricated, skilled assemblies go to work putting things together.
On the chassis line, we begin with we put the axles, which have the wheels and all that componentry on them. Then we go down into a tubing or and our tailpiping and all the kind of subsystems that are on the chassis. From there, we'll move on in and actually put the driver's platform on. That's of course got all the accelerator and the brake pedals and the steering wheel. And that'll actually be the platform that the driver will sit in when the bus is completed. We drop in our engine, which has a transmission already hooked up, do our drivetrain.
On a parallel assembly line, body construction begins. First, workers install the steel bow roll cage. It's the skeleton of the bus body. Each rib is a single bent steel beam for added strength. A school bus by federal regulation has to be able to maintain its integrity in a rollover accident. Skinners start covering the framework with steel sheeting. They use adhesive and rivets, lots of rivets.
In a typical bus, we have in the neighborhood of 6,000 rivets that's going in there. We also have some glue in strategic spots because the joint strength is real important.
Safety standards mandate that wherever two pieces of metal come together, the joint has to be at least 60% as strong as the metal that surrounds it. That means a rivet every inch in places. As the bus begins to take shape, interior sheet metal, windows, seats, and an identifying coat of yellow paint follows. The body and the chassis come together in the final step. Every 20 minutes, the line moves forward and a Bluebird earns its wings. Although Bluebird produces a huge volume of buses, they're still committed to the safety of every single vehicle. An enormous amount of testing and research goes into school bus construction. Many times safer than automobile transportation, most school buses don't have seat belts, but instead offer a unique passive restraint system in the event of an accident.
The student doesn't have to do anything but go in, sit in a seat, and he's surrounded by a safe environment. It's done in 2 ways. The seat frame itself is an energy-absorbing frame, both for forward crashes and rearward crashes. Then on top of the frame is a special kind of padding that absorbs any impact of the head or neck or knees. In fact, there's special foam padding for the knees for femur loads and another type of padding to protect the facial structure.
Fuel tank integrity is also a prime concern. Fuel tanks are located between the frame rails of the chassis for protection. At testing facilities, buses are subjected to crash simulations to ensure that school buses remain the safest form of transportation on the road.
Safety is paramount to our industry and to Bluebird in particular. You have to understand the numbers to get this in perspective. Our nation has about 440,000 school buses that operate every day of the school year. This fleet of buses travels about 4.3 billion miles a year, and we transport 23.5 million students. And we like to think of every one of those students as our own children.